There is a version of Florida that does not exist on a single travel brochure. No beaches, no theme parks, no retired couples in matching visors arguing about early bird specials. This is the other Florida, the one that sits above the theme parks and below the rest of the country's attention, where the Spanish moss hangs so thick it blocks out the afternoon sun, and where you can buy a 3-bedroom house with a yard and a porch for less than most people spend on a decent used truck. The question, as always, is not whether the deal is real. The question is why nobody is taking it. So subscribe and let's start. Number 10. Greenville, Madison County. Greenville sits in Madison County in the Big Bend region of North Florida, which is what Floridians call the part of the state where the peninsula stops pretending to be a peninsula and the land just quietly gives up and becomes the American South. And I mean that geographically and spiritually. The town has a population of around 800 people, and that number has been declining with the kind of steady, unhurried confidence of a man who knows he is going to win the argument eventually. The median household income hovers around $22,000 a year. The poverty rate sits above 30%. If you did not know you were in Florida, you would swear you had taken a wrong turn somewhere in rural Georgia and just kept driving. Greenville was a tobacco town. That is the beginning and the end of most of its story. Madison County was once one of the top tobacco-producing counties in the entire state of Florida. And for a while, that meant something. It meant jobs and commerce and enough economic activity to justify a downtown. Shade-grown tobacco, the kind used for cigar wrappers, was cultivated under enormous cloth canopies stretched over the fields like a giant's bedsheets. The land was rich, the work was hard, the money was real. Then the tobacco industry collapsed the way industries always collapse in small American towns. Not with a dramatic announcement or a ribbon cutting in reverse, just a slow withdrawal like a tide going out and never coming back. Federal tobacco buyouts in the early 2000s accelerated the process, paying farmers to stop growing and walking away. When the crop left, it took everything attached to it. You can find homes in Greenville today for $8,000 to $19,000. Some of them are wood frame houses with wide porches that have been sitting in the same family for 3 generations. Others have been empty long enough for the vines to start making architectural decisions. The nearest Walmart is in Madison, about 15 miles east. The nearest hospital is also in Madison. If Madison ever has a bad day, Greenville has nowhere to go. Carl says tobacco was never good for you anyway. I told Carl that is not the kind of analysis that helps a town pay its water bill. Number 9, Jasper, Hamilton County. Jasper is the county seat of Hamilton County, which sounds impressive until you find out that Hamilton County has a total population of around 14,000 people spread across 517 square miles. That is the kind of population density that makes a map feel embarrassed. The town itself has about 2,000 residents. It has a courthouse, which every county seat has by law and by obligation, and it has a Dollar General, which every small town in America has by some arrangement I have never fully understood. Beyond that, Jasper's commercial infrastructure is what you would generously call modest and what you would honestly call sparse. Hamilton County sits directly on the Georgia border, which means Jasper residents who need anything beyond the basics are looking at a drive to Valdosta, Georgia, rather than anywhere in Florida. When your county seat's nearest functional city is in a different state, that tells you something important about where the economic gravity actually lives. Home prices in Jasper range from around $12,000 to $25,000. The housing stock is a mix of mid-century block homes and older wood frame structures that have survived the humidity through a combination of solid construction and pure stubbornness. North Florida humidity is not a mild inconvenience. It is an active participant in the destruction of every building material known to man. Wood rots, metal rusts, concrete spalls. The humidity in Hamilton County does not take weekends off. The poverty rate in Hamilton County is above 25%. The unemployment rate runs consistently above the state average. The county has a correctional institution, a phosphate mining history, and not much else that could be described as an economic engine. Young people leave for Gainesville or Jacksonville or Tallahassee and do not come back, which is a sentence I am going to end up writing in slightly different forms for the next 8 entries on this list. Number 8, Lee, Madison County. Lee, Florida has a population of approximately 330 people, which means it is smaller than most high school graduating classes in the cities that most people reading a real estate listing are coming from. Madison County keeps showing up on this list the way a persistent cough shows up in January. You think it is done, and then there it is again. Lee was a railroad town. The Seaboard Airline Railway ran through here in the early 20th century, and for a while that gave Lee a reason to exist beyond geography. A depot, some commerce, a handful of businesses that served the people passing through. Then the railroad rationalized its routes the way railroads always do, and Lee found itself without its reason for existing, which is a problem that is difficult to solve with a town council meeting. The homes here are some of the cheapest in Madison County, which is saying something. Properties can be found for $5,000 to $15,000. Some of them are original shotgun houses, the narrow single-file floor plan that was built for ventilation before air conditioning existed. In the days before electricity, a shotgun house was clever engineering. Today, it is a historic artifact that also needs a new roof. Lee has no hospital. Lee has no grocery store in the traditional sense. Lee has approximately the economic momentum of a stopped clock. But the land around it is green and flat and legitimately beautiful. The kind of landscape where the sky feels twice as large as it does anywhere else, and the morning light comes in sideways through the pine trees and makes everything look like a painting someone abandoned before they could finish it. Gladys looked at a listing in Lee once and said it had potential. I told her potential is just another word for work nobody has done yet. Number 7, Carrabelle, Franklin County. Now we are getting somewhere different. Carrabelle sits on the Gulf Coast in Franklin County, right where the Apalachicola River meets the Gulf of Mexico, and the land runs out of ideas and just becomes water. This is the Forgotten Coast, which is what the tourism board calls it, presumably because nobody came up with anything better and also because it is accurate. Carrabelle has a population of around 2,000 people. It has a working waterfront, some fishing industry, a handful of restaurants, and one of the most famous telephone booths in American history. For decades, Carrabelle had a single payphone mounted to a pole on a highway, and that payphone served as the official public phone for the entire town. It had its own listed number. People called it. It was answered sometimes. The booth is gone now, replaced by a replica for tourists, which is either charming or depressing depending on your relationship with irony. Franklin County is one of the most naturally beautiful counties in Florida. 90% of the county's land is either state or federally owned, which means the development pressure that has consumed the rest of coastal Florida has left Carrabelle and its neighbors largely alone. St. George Island is nearby. The Apalachicola National Forest covers enormous stretches of pine flatwoods. The oysters from Apalachicola Bay were once considered among the finest in the world. Were, past tense. The oyster fishery collapsed in the early 2010s after a combination of drought, upstream water withdrawals by Georgia, and environmental degradation essentially destroyed the bay's salinity balance. The oystermen who had worked these waters for generations found themselves without a livelihood almost overnight. Georgia and Florida spent years in federal court arguing about the water, and meanwhile the oysters died and the watermen left. Home prices in Carrabelle range from $20,000 to $60,000 for modest properties, which is cheap by any coastal standard, but reflects the reality of a town where the primary industry is no longer functioning the way it once did. Insurance is a significant consideration. Franklin County is exposed to Gulf storms and flood risk is real. What you save on the purchase price, you will spend on premiums. Carl says he always wanted to live on the coast. I told him the Forgotten Coast is called that for a reason, and that reason is not whimsy. Number 6, Blountstown, Calhoun County. Calhoun County has a population of around 14,000 people and a median household income of approximately $28,000, which puts it firmly in the bottom 20% of Florida counties by economic measure. Blountstown is the county seat, population around 2,500, and it sits on the eastern bank of the Apalachicola River in the middle of a landscape that is genuinely gorgeous and genuinely poor at the same time. The Apalachicola River is one of the most ecologically significant rivers in the southeast. It drains the entire Chattahoochee Flint River system from Georgia and Alabama and flows south through the Florida Panhandle to the Gulf. The bottomland hardwood forests along its banks are some of the most biodiverse temperate ecosystems in North America. None of that biodiversity pays property taxes. Blountstown had a timber industry, it had some agricultural activity. It had the river, which was useful for commerce before the highway system made rivers irrelevant to the movement of goods. When the timber operations scaled back and the agricultural economy mechanized, Calhoun County found itself with beautiful scenery, excellent fishing, and not enough jobs to keep a generation in place. Properties in Blountstown range from $15,000 to $35,000. The housing stock is a mix of older homes with genuine character and newer construction that was built optimistically during Florida's broader real estate booms and has since returned to earth. The school district struggles to retain teachers because Calhoun County cannot match the salaries available 45 minutes away in Tallahassee. When your teachers are commuting in from the capital city because they cannot afford to live on a rural county salary, you have a structural problem that a school board meeting cannot solve. The nearest major hospital is in Panama City, about an hour west. Tallahassee is about an hour east. In a medical emergency, an hour is a very long time to think about decisions you cannot unmake. Number 5, Wewahitchka, Gulf County. I am going to take a moment here because Wewahitchka deserves one. It is pronounced Wewahitchka, which I am telling you now so you do not embarrass yourself at a gas station. Gulf County residents have been correcting tourists on this for 100 years, and they are tired. Wewahitchka, or Wewa if you want to fit in, has a population of around 2,000 people and sits in Gulf County between the Dead Lakes to the north and the Gulf of Mexico to the south. The Dead Lakes are exactly what they sound like. A flooded river swamp where the Chattahoochee River was dammed by sandbars and the rising water killed the trees, leaving a forest of bare white cypress trunks standing in the water like the bleached bones of something enormous. It is one of the most eerie and beautiful places in Florida. Bass fishermen love it. Real estate agents photograph it carefully. Wewahitchka is the Tupelo honey capital of the world. Genuine Tupelo honey produced from the blossoms of Tupelo gum trees that grow along the river swamps of the Apalachicola and Chattahoochee rivers is one of the rarest and most expensive honeys in the world. It is the only honey that does not crystallize. A single jar can run $30 to $40 in specialty stores. Van Morrison wrote a song called Tupelo Honey in 1971, and while he was not specifically singing about Gulf County, Florida, local beekeepers have been making that association for decades, and nobody has stopped them. The honey is real. The economy around it is not sufficient to sustain a town. Gulf County has a poverty rate above 19% and a median household income that hovers around $38,000, which is the highest on this list so far, which tells you more about how low the bar has been set than it does about Gulf County's prosperity. Home prices in Wewa range from $18,000 to $40,000. Flood zones are a serious consideration here. Gulf County took a direct hit from Hurricane Michael in October 2018, a Category 5 storm that made landfall near Mexico Beach with winds of 160 miles per hour. The damage in Gulf County was catastrophic. Some properties still bear the marks. Number 4, Hosford, Liberty County. Liberty County is the least populated county in the state of Florida, 8,000 people. The entire county, 8,000. There are apartment buildings in Miami that hold more people than that. Hosford is an unincorporated community in Liberty County, which means it does not technically have a government, a mayor, a city council, or a municipal water system. It has houses, some roads, a handful of businesses, and the Apalachicola National Forest pressing in on every side like the trees are slowly reclaiming the ground they were cut from 100 years ago, which they are. You can find properties in and around Hosford for $5,000 to $15,000. I want to let that sit for a moment. $5,000 for a property in the state of Florida. Florida, where a parking spot in Miami Beach sold for $135,000 in 2023. Same state, different universe. The reason for the price is the reason for everything on this list. There are no jobs. The timber industry that built Liberty County has been mechanized down to a fraction of its former workforce. The county has no hospital. The nearest emergency room is in Bristol, the county seat, and Bristol's medical infrastructure is itself limited enough that serious emergencies require transport to Tallahassee, 45 minutes to an hour away, depending on which road the ambulance takes and what the weather is doing. Internet access in Liberty County is a genuine problem. For anyone considering remote work as a way to afford cheap rural property, Liberty County will test that theory aggressively. Satellite internet exists, but performs inconsistently, particularly during the afternoon thunderstorms that roll through North Florida from May through September with the regularity and enthusiasm of a standing appointment nobody asked for. Chad says he looked at land in Liberty County once, and the listing actually said the property had seasonal creek access. I asked him what seasonal meant. He said it meant the creek was there when it wanted to be. He passed. Number 3. Sneads, Jackson County. Jackson County sits in the western end of the Florida Panhandle, where the state starts to look less like Florida and more like Alabama by geography, by culture, and by economic circumstance. Sneads is a small town of around 2,000 people on the shores of Lake Seminole, which is the reservoir formed by the Jim Woodruff Dam at the confluence of the Chattahoochee and Flint rivers. The lake is real, and it is genuinely nice. Fishing is good. The scenery along the water has a quiet, unhurried quality that people who are tired of hurrying find appealing. Properties near the water in Sneads can range from $15,000 to $40,000 depending on proximity to the shore and whether the structure has a foundation that still agrees with the ground beneath it. Jackson County is one of the more economically complex counties in the Florida Panhandle. It has a correctional institution economy, which means a significant portion of its employment comes from the Appalachia Correctional Institution and the related public sector jobs that surround it. Prison employment is stable, state-funded, and recession-resistant, which sounds like a selling point until you consider what it means about the alternatives. When incarceration is the most reliable industry in a county, the county has a structural problem that goes beyond the capacity of local economic development committees. The poverty rate in Jackson County runs above 18%. The median household income is around $37,000. Young people leave for Tallahassee or Dothan, Alabama, or Pensacola and find that none of those places are perfect either, but all of them have more than one grocery store and a traffic light that actually has enough traffic to justify its existence. Jackson County experienced serious flooding in 2017 and 2018 from Hurricane Irma and Hurricane Michael, respectively. Michael in particular tore through the county with sustained winds that stripped roofs from buildings that had stood for half a century. The recovery has been uneven. Some properties were repaired, others were patched to a condition that photographs acceptably and listed for whatever the market would bear, which was not much. If you are buying in Sneads, get a thorough inspection from someone who has seen hurricane damage before, because hurricane damage has a way of hiding behind fresh paint in a manner that would make a used car salesman blush. Number 2, Chattahoochee, Gadsden County. Gadsden County is the only majority-minority county in Florida and one of the poorest in the state. The median household income sits around $32,000. The poverty rate hovers near 25%. Gadsden County sits directly west of Tallahassee, which is the state capital and home to Florida State University and Florida A&M University, and yet the proximity to all of that has not translated into economic opportunity for most of Gadsden County's residents in any meaningful structural way. The capital is right there. The poverty is also right there. Both things are true at the same time. Chattahoochee is a town of about 3,000 people on the Apalachicola River, where Florida, Georgia, and Alabama approach each other on the map like three neighbors who never quite got along. The town has a history that is difficult to write about delicately, so I am going to write about it directly. For most of its modern history, Chattahoochee was defined by the Florida State Hospital, a large psychiatric institution that opened in 1876 and at its peak housed over 3,000 patients. For much of its history, the institution's conditions were a source of significant controversy. Overcrowding, understaffing, and treatment practices that would not meet any contemporary standard of care were documented repeatedly by state investigators and journalists over the decades. The hospital has been significantly reduced in scope, and most of its historic buildings have been closed or demolished. What remains is a town trying to rebuild an identity that was almost entirely organized around an institution that no longer functions at the scale it once did. State employment still exists at the hospital site, but at a fraction of its former level. The town's downtown is largely vacant. The houses are cheap, ranging from $12,000 to $28,000, and some of them are substantial old homes built during the era when Chattahoochee had a larger and more stable population. The river is right there. The Apalachicola is beautiful at Chattahoochee. The fishing is good. The bridge over the river connects to Georgia and gives the town a geographic position that should theoretically mean something economically. Theoretically and actually are two different counties in North Florida. Gladys said she read about Chattahoochee online and found the history unsettling. I told her that most of American history is unsettling if you read past the first paragraph. She said that was not the comforting response she was looking for. I told her I was doing my best. Number 1, Perry, Taylor County, and we end where the timber ended. Perry is the county seat of Taylor County, and with a population of around 6,500, it is the largest community on this list, which makes it feel almost metropolitan by the standards of everything that came before it. There is a Walmart, there is a hospital, albeit a small one. There is a Hardee's, which Carl considers a sign of civilization, regardless of what anyone else thinks about that. Perry was a timber town. For most of the 20th century, Taylor County was defined by its forests and by the industries that processed them. Buckeye Cellulose, later acquired and renamed several times, operated one of the largest pulp mills in the eastern United States here for decades. At its peak, the mill employed over 1,000 people directly and supported an entire regional economy of logging operations, trucking contractors, equipment suppliers, and all the ancillary businesses that grow up around a large industrial employer the way kudzu grows up around anything that holds still long enough. The mill went through a series of ownership changes, each one bringing new promises and a slightly smaller workforce. By the time Foley Cellulose shut down the Perry Mill in 2014, it had employed about 350 people. The closure was not a surprise to anyone who had been paying attention. It was a slow-motion ending that the town had been watching for years, the way you watch a thunderstorm move across a flat landscape. You can see it coming for a long time, and it still hurts when it arrives. Taylor County's poverty rate sits above 20%. The median household income is around $34,000. The population has been declining for over a decade. The homes are priced accordingly. You can find solid 3-bedroom houses in Perry for $14,000 to $25,000. There are larger properties with acreage on the county's edges for similar prices. Some of the old timber-era homes in the historic parts of town are genuinely handsome, built with the confidence of people who expected the good times to last longer than they did. The Gulf Coast is about 20 minutes south of Perry, which sounds like it should change everything and does not quite change enough. The coastline here is undeveloped by Florida standards, mostly preserved as part of the Big Bend Wildlife Management Area and the network of state lands that line this stretch of coast. There are no beach towns, there are no condominiums, there are no snowbirds and golf carts, there are salt marshes and seagrass beds and scallops in season, and the kind of absolute quiet that you cannot find on any other stretch of Florida coastline. Taylor County is sometimes called the Nature Coast, and it earns the name. But nature does not write a paycheck. And when the mill closed and the 1,000 jobs became 350 jobs and then 0 jobs, the nature was still there and the people started leaving anyway. Because a beautiful coastline is something you visit. A job is something you need. Perry is also the epicenter of a genuine transportation problem. Highway 27 and Highway 19 run through the town, but Perry sits in a region of Florida that is not convenient to anything. Tallahassee is 50 miles west. Gainesville is 80 miles south. Jacksonville is over 150 miles northeast. If you live in Perry and your employer is not in Perry, you are commuting on 2-lane roads through pine forests for an amount of time that will rearrange your relationship with audiobooks and your own thoughts. Carl looked at a house in Perry on Zillow last November and called me at 9 in the evening to tell me he found a 4-bedroom home with a detached garage and a half-acre yard for $17,500. He sounded like a man who had found something buried in his backyard. I told him to sleep on it. He called me again in the morning. He had slept on it. He was still thinking about it. That is the thing about Perry and about every town on this list. The price is real, the house is real, the garage and the half-acre yard are real, and so are the 50 miles to Tallahassee and the 20% poverty rate and the mill that closed in 2014 and has not been replaced by anything of comparable scale. The truth about North Florida. Here is what nobody tells you when you see a listing for a $19,000 house in the Florida Panhandle, and your first reaction is to check if it is a typo. The purchase price is the smallest number in the transaction. North Florida's cheap housing sits in counties where the infrastructure was built for populations that no longer exist. Water systems age without the tax revenue to replace them. Roads crack under the subtropical heat and the occasional hard freeze that North Florida gets in January, which surprises people who thought Florida was uniformly tropical. It is not. Tallahassee gets snow some winters. Your pipes will find this information relevant. Flood insurance is not optional here. The Big Bend coast is one of the most hurricane-vulnerable stretches in the country. Hurricane Michael showed everyone in 2018 what a Category 5 looks like when it arrives with serious intentions. Properties that survived may carry damage that hides behind fresh paint and optimism. Mold in North Florida is not a possibility. It is a certainty in any home that took water and was not properly remediated. Remediation does not show up in the listing price. The opioid crisis has reached every county on this list. Economic collapse, geographic isolation, limited health care, and decades of hard physical labor have made addiction a structural feature of rural North Florida that no real estate database will tell you about. The healthcare situation is its own emergency. Several of these counties are federally designated shortage areas. What that means in plain language is that if something goes seriously wrong, the ambulance is coming from very far away. But the land is extraordinary. The rivers are cold and clear. The springs are among the most beautiful freshwater environments on Earth. The people who stayed are not people who could not leave. Many chose this. They know which road floods in August and which neighbor shows up with a chainsaw after a storm without being asked. That knowledge is worth something. Carl is still thinking about it. Gladys is still moving the listings to the recycling bin. Carl is still fishing them back out. Take care of yourselves. And if you are in North Florida, take care of your roof. Humidity is patient and it has nothing but time.